Hey there, welcome to Business Breakthroughs. I'm Neal DiPentino, I'm president of Titan Media Works and your host for today's show, where we're going to break through the BS to get real world advice and direction from those who are and have been deep down in the trenches. Today, we're honored to have Melissa Coloton with us. She is the founder of Melissa Coloton, LLC. She is dedicated to helping individuals find and pursue the work they love, balancing fulfilling careers and joyful lives. Melissa brings a unique perspective to our conversation, and we're so excited to have her with us today. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So you're up there in Raleigh, Durham, or actually Raleigh, right?
Raleigh,
and
yep.
And it was funny because we were talking about your background, and I'm like, "Is that a virtual background? Because that's really cool." And you're like, "No, that's my real house." I think that's awesome.
It's my special place in the house.
I love it. Everybody needs a special place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, hey, Melissa, we're going to talk about your business and how you help your clients and what you do. But before we do that, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I've lived in the Carolinas, I think somewhere in the vicinity of a little over 20 years. I stopped adding it up after a while. But I come from upstate New York, where I was born and raised a farmer's daughter. And eventually my dad, unfortunately, had to offload his farm and go back to work at a paper mill. Did that for quite a while. And then they closed their doors. So my parents decided, why not head south? So that's how I ended up here. I went to High Point University for my undergraduate and NC State University with my master's degree in education, and spent a good portion of my time in the commercial side of businesses. So a lot of sales are in my background, and then eventually moved on to running my own business. And so that's what I'm doing now.
Well, fantastic. And you're doing a wonderful job at that, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're talking about some really kind of interesting heavy duty stuff. And you promised me that you were going to be nice to me and talk in small words today. So
yes, I will do my best.
Absolutely. So Melissa Coloton, LLC, and you also, under that, you have the Career Building Association. You want to tell us a little bit about those businesses and maybe what inspired you to get that started?
Yeah, sure. So I started off my own business thinking I wanted to be a little bit heavier handed on the consulting side because, like I said, I had done sales my whole life. So I was leaning into commercial needs from organizations in the clinical research space because that's where I've spent about the last 15 years of my career. And when I started off, it wasn't that I disliked it. In fact, I'm still doing a good bit of the consulting and the sales stuff. But I also ran into a pretty significant need amongst young professionals. So it was through my networking that I started talking to a good bit of young professionals who were graduating, really frustrated they couldn't find jobs. And some of them, honestly, Neal, were just so sharp. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? Well, why can't they find work? And so I started digging into it and just uncovered a lot of pain points of interviewing skills, resume building, and networking and other things that made them feel like they were lost and fish out of water. So I just saw a need and decided to move forward with solving that because I've spent a significant portion of my time as an executive and a manager and doing some hiring. And I really enjoy taking great talent and helping them grow into their careers and be successful. So it was always a passion of mine because, like I said, I've been in management, and that was one of the biggest things I loved doing was helping other people be successful. And so it took something that I think was always an undercurrent and just matched it up with a need. And that's how the Career Builder Association began. So we're underway. It's a membership group. You pay monthly. It was also part of my mission was to have it accessible. That was very, very important to me. And so it's a pretty reasonable price that you pay per month. You can cancel anytime. And you get me, myself, and I as your mentor and coach. And my vision is to continue to expand it. And if we need to add more mentors, I'm thinking vision wise, I'll do, sort of a mentor match type of thing. But I always want to keep it so that I'm helping and being the coach because that's what I enjoy. So I'm just matching up the needs with what I enjoy and what my passions are.
That's awesome. So, yeah, yeah, it's really difficult, I think, for somebody who's coming out of college, especially, and maybe somebody who's like trying to transition from one job to another, to really make those steps. And it feels like a real cruel world out there, but it's really not if you're really prepared. So, what are some of the practical steps that you teach people when they're looking for a new job or looking for that perfect job, I guess?
Right. So I like to take people through three main things, which is where are you? Where do you want to go? And a big ticket item is also who you are, because if you can't explain your strengths, your values, things that motivate you, it's really difficult to nail that interview or land that beautiful job that you want. So I start with those three big ticket items of really figuring out what's going on, and then we move forward from there. That's the biggest piece of the program. But of course, things always come up that are, I would call them a little more ticky tacky. For example, when people are doing interviews, sometimes they just don't know what they're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest piece, because you don't get feedback from interviewers. And that's a real challenge for interviewees, because they have no idea why they're not getting the job and they're just on to the next thing. So that's the process I take people through. And then I think there's more tactical items that are bolted onto that, where it's, okay, what do you want to do? So we don't feel so lost, because that's a big thing for young professionals is I feel so lost, which makes sense because you're going from university to being thrown into this world you've never been in before, without your parents, without your friends, and you're just, expected to get a job. So I help people not feel so lost, and then help them with the more tactical items of actually landing the job. Or if they want to do something like start their own business, I can obviously help with that as well.
Well, fantastic. I always look at like looking for a new job as almost like doing a sales pitch to some extent. I mean,
Yeah.
you're obviously in a sales pitch, you're finding a problem, and then you're finding a solution to that problem, and you're looking for a positive outcome. So when you're selling yourself, it's kind of the thing. You're kind of the solution to a problem that employer may be having at the time. So, I mean, do you take that kind of approach with your students or with your people you're coaching?
To some degree, but depending on where somebody is on their career, if they're right out the gates, fresh from college, maybe less than, I would say, 2 to 3 years, there's a lot more of this. Can you show up and do the job we want you to do versus the value add that you bring to the table? And then what ends up happening is, as somebody gets into a company, sort of proves their value and shows what they can do and figures out what they want to do. And then that's their motion. But someone that's a little bit more, I would say, 5 to 10 to a little bit less than 15 years of experience, it might look and feel slightly different. And that's when they start building that experience where they can bring value to the table and they can start solving problems for companies. Mm-hmm. But I would say the big ticket item outside of all of that is sort of your pre-work, I call it, or networking. Networking is something everybody talks about, but not a lot of people do very well. I remember Simon Sinek calls it, networking isn't going to a place and figuring out who can help you. It's figuring out who you can help. And so as a young professional, again, that can be kind of complicated because they don't have a huge network typically. They don't have a ton of work history yet. But I still think having that mindset of how can I help you going into networking versus how can you help me is the mind shift I try to get everybody in, because a lot of young professionals are going into it of, oh my gosh, I just need to find a job. But sort of that more mid-careerist, I would say they have a bigger opportunity to go into it and say, how can I help other people? And that's actually a much better and more energizing and more inspiring way to find a job anyway. This applying to hundreds and hundreds of jobs is what I'm seeing people do, and they get really frustrated and burnt out from that quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're talking about networking, let's say for like maybe somebody who's just coming out of college, or, maybe they don't have the 2 or 3 years experience. Would you say maybe like, trying to get involved with maybe a local chamber of commerce? I mean, where do they look for networks to help them to, to meet people that may be potentially looking for employees?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest opportunities I would say is anything that's in your industry. So there's so much networking built around specific industries. For example, I mentioned to you earlier, I've been in clinical research for a really long time. And just around this area, there are tons of clinical research get-togethers. And the really cool thing is there's always a mix of, new grads, mid-careerists, people who've been in the industry for a really long time. So I would say start there first with anybody looking for in-person networking. And then if there's any associations, for example, I'll just use clinical research again. Like I'm involved in Women in Bio. It's a nationwide group who participates online and in person. So there's opportunity if you may not live near something like that, like if you're more rural. So I would start with your industry and see if there's any get-togethers specifically to that. But then, yes, there's the more generalized ones like the Chamber of Commerce, and some cities even have young professional groups that are helping. Of course, I will be happy to help.
Of course.
Career Builder Association, which as that expands, that's obviously going to be the idea as well, is to have a networking branch to it. But I think also just helping yourself by sharing what you're up to and what you're looking to do from a more personal brand standpoint. Networking on LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn is basically like going to a huge conference on a daily basis, and if you're not active there, you should be. Pro tip.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yep.
Absolutely. So now that you're networking, you're going out, you're trying to find that perfect job. You're trying to you're trying to get yourself out there and everything. Do you help your clients then once they've established that I've maybe found a couple candidates. Now, what's the next step? How do you help them then?
Yes, for sure. Because, obviously in the name Career Builder. So if somebody then does land the position that they want, for example, I've got a couple women in my group right now who are a little bit further along in their careers. I would say they've been working for, between 8 and 12 years or so. And they're trying to take the tract of more of a promotional type of thing. So they're trying to accelerate their career. And that's definitely available in the Career Builder Association. And I highly recommend it because this is an environment where I have enough experience to quickly pick up what you might be, where you might be misleading yourself down your career path and getting frustrated that you're not getting the promotion or you're not being tapped on the shoulder for the next move. I see a lot of that. So we work through what could be happening. And then, of course, how to continue that networking even inside the company you're working for, and then externally in your own industry outside of the company that you're working for. So 100%. I think that's actually the part of the Career Builder Association, not that I just don't enjoy the other parts, but that part I really, really enjoy because it's fun to watch. Individuals decide that they want to be ambitious and go for the next level, and then helping them get there.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure that from time to time you have conversations with people and they're not moving up the ladder. They're not getting promoted. People aren't paying attention to them or whatever. Do you ever have conversations with people that say, maybe this just isn't the right career path for you? Maybe we need to look at something different. And how do you steer them if you do that?
Yes. I haven't actually done that in the Career Builder Association yet. I have experienced people with that problem. But we picked up on some other nuances. For example, this one in particular in person comes into mind. They were using negative language more often than they realized. So just in talking to me, and then, I knew that they were probably using it with me. They're using it elsewhere.
Right.
Saying things like, that's really challenging or that's really difficult. And if everything's challenging and difficult, there's a really good chance, unfortunately, you're coming off in a way that you don't need to be coming off. And nobody's really going to be, energized to help you get ahead with that kind of disposition, even though that wasn't really her disposition. It was just the language she was using. So I do see that people, experience this frustration of, what am I doing wrong? And unfortunately, sometimes managers see that as too much of a conflict to say something like that to somebody, or, even somebody's tone of their voice can make a big difference. We need to get voice coaching. So I will say things to them that, it's probably sometimes a little hard to hear, but I know it's hard for them because a lot of managers will be avoidant of things like that are hard to tell somebody. But I would say one of the big ticket items in the Career Builder Association, one of my big passions is helping people find and do work they love. That's sort of my tagline is, find and do work that you love. So if there's this frustration there, there's a really good chance that somebody's probably not doing the work they're meant to do. And I have tools that help them figure out, what that looks like for them so that they can really lean into saying, yeah, this is really what I want to do for a living. And this really excites me. And then helping them pivot out of whatever it is they went to school for. I mean, we all know that I went to school for athletic training and I ended up getting into clinical research. So it's not uncommon, right? Is we go to school for something because we choose something when we're 18. And then by the time we're 25, it's like, what am I doing it now?
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of pivoting in that time frame for young professionals. And I have tools that help them figure out what do they really want to do? What do they really enjoy? And then how to get those jobs. That's the big point, because if someone looks at your resume and you were in marketing and then all of a sudden, you want to do something completely different, it's hard to get your head around how do I do that? And a lot of young professionals start defaulting where I just need to go back to school. Like, hang on, before you go spend thousands of dollars more, which is fine. But before you do that, let's figure out if that's really what you want to do, or you're just feeling lost. So college is the next answer.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of what you're saying, I kind of understand, because, you're talking about, the positive attitude, negative attitude, the way you're coming across that time. Your body language was super important too. I would imagine. I know that I have people that I work with sometimes that I'm like, you roll your eyes at me one more time, so it's,
I hear you rolling your eyes at me.
So, I mean, all of that, but sometimes we just don't realize we're doing it. So it really is kind of cool to have somebody like you who can call that out, and because it's really your job. I mean, they're expecting you to do that. Whereas if they have somebody else maybe inside an organization or a boss or whatever, then it looks like it's more of an insult as opposed to like a good critique.
Right, exactly. And as a manager, even for myself, when I was in management, one of the hardest things to address is I call it someone's personality, right? So something that's just who somebody is, but it's altering their ability to accelerate their career and quote unquote get ahead. It's incredibly difficult to address. And there can even be some implications there from an HR standpoint too, right? You have to be really careful with all that stuff too. So management has a tendency to be avoidant of that. And then that person's left feeling like, well, I'm trying really hard. I'm working really hard. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do and then some. What's going on? So I sort of pride myself in being able to work with somebody and be really super honest with them, but very kind. I give it to them in a very kind way and a very constructive way so that they then know what to do with that information. So it's not just I drop a bomb on them and then walk away. I can give them resources. I can coach them through it. So so it can be super challenging both for the manager and the employee, especially when it's really something that's ingrained in you, like a personality trait.
All right. Let me ask you. So like somebody who's looking for a new job, they've got the right resume. It looks really good. They're prepared completely to go to the next step, which might be like the interview, right? But then people melt at interviews. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard for some people to do that. What kind of suggestions would you offer to people who maybe get really super nervous before an interview?
Right. Well, I know this is super tactical, but if you're a caffeine drinker, I highly recommend you back off it for the day because that can get your nerves going more than anything. So if it's like a morning interview, try not to have a full cup of coffee, maybe just a couple sips or half a cup, and that'll help settle your nerves down. I also recommend, again, this is super tactical, but moving your body around that morning, whether it's going for a walk or just even walking around the house, because you just have to kind of get those jitters out of your body. And then I truly, truly believe that the more prepared you are, the less nervous you'll be. And so just kind of know everything there is to know about that company and the person that's interviewing you. And don't be afraid to ask if there's a recruiter, for example, involved, don't be afraid to ask them questions before the interview so that you can be prepared. Who am I interviewing with? How long have they been at the company? Can I send them an email? Can I send them my resume ahead of time? So if you feel super prepared, you'll be less nervous. I've also heard a lot of concern with the virtual interviewing that's going on these days, which is way more happening way more than it ever used to. I don't even know if I've talked to somebody who's interviewed in person in a really long time. Maybe more at the executive level, people do that, but virtual interviewing. So cameras are starting to make people really, really nervous. So if you can practice using the camera, make sure everything is set up, because the last thing you want is your technology to fail on you. And then that just throws you way off. It just is a complete disaster. It actually happened to me the other day where I had a big presentation and my computer didn't work. So it can be really distracting, especially I have a lot of experience with that. So I was fine. I got through it. But someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, that would really melt. And then just practice with a safe person. I have a great example recently of a woman who she's so intelligent, has a great degree, went to a great school, really hard worker. She was out networking, doing all the right things, and could not get a job offer. This is weird. So we got on a Zoom and I asked her what are some of the questions you're being asked? She told me. I said, okay, how are you answering them? And then I noticed she starts reading from a script. And I was like, I said, are you reading from a script? And she's like, well, yeah, because I just want to make sure I've got the answers right. I'm like, oh no, that makes people not trust you because you're trying to read from something and they don't trust that you know the information. You know the information, stop using the script. And then the other thing that she was doing was she was moving her feet. And so her chair was like moving in the background. You just don't notice these things about yourself. So if you can practice with somebody safe, using the equipment you're going to use during the interview on your computer, that's the best you can do. You're always going to feel a little nervous, and that's okay. Nobody's going to judge you on that, especially individuals who are used to interviewing and hiring younger professionals. They completely understand that. So just know that, you just need to take a deep breath sometimes and know that they've been there before themselves and they get it. I think the best thing though is practice with all your equipment, practice your actual interview with a safe person who can give you critical feedback and is not afraid to tell you you're moving around in your chair and it's really distracting.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. You know, what's really, this kind of irks me a little bit, actually, not necessarily in an interview, but just, I guess in meetings in general, especially when you're, using Zoom or, some kind of an online type platform, is that people don't know where the camera's at, right? And it looks like, and they're looking off, and it looks like they're disengaged, So I'm like having a conversation with somebody, and they're looking off someplace else, and it's like you have absolutely no interest in anything that I'm saying. You probably didn't hear a word, but then it comes after you go to like maybe a Q&A type thing, you find out that they have been listening. It just doesn't look like they are. So I think that's maybe something. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know why I threw it.
No, I think that's perfect. Yes. And actually, you made me think of something else too. Make sure you have an extremely well lit, because, back in the day when you would prepare for an interview and you would do all these things that were like the don't do's, right? Don't wear too much perfume, wear something that's not distracting. And today it's a little bit different because we're so virtual. And I cannot tell you how many times I've interviewed somebody who looked like they were sitting in a closet. I'm like, are you sitting in a closet? It was so dark. And it was like the walls were like this. One time I thought I had a woman, I was like, is that your laundry behind you? So your world is being exposed a lot more to hiring managers. So you have to be really, really careful. You don't have to get something like I have back here, but blur your background, do things that are kind of above and beyond to make sure your environment looks really good. And then again, ask somebody, hey, will you pop on a video with me real quick and make sure I don't look too dark, make sure turn the lights on, get near windows. So there was this one I'll never forget. I was like, gosh, this woman is so sharp. But I was having such a hard time getting beyond the fact that I literally couldn't see her. It was so dark and so blurry. And I know a lot of people would come in and go, well, Melissa, I can't afford, a nice camera or something like that. Ask the library, your local library, ask a friend if they've got one you can borrow. These things are like, they pop right off your computer and you just plug them in, or if you don't have a computer, ask somebody to borrow theirs. Like, do whatever it takes to make sure that you're not showing up in anything that's really distracting. And darkness is extremely distracting.
It is.
The person's just looking and I'm like, I can't even see this person. And so again, subconsciously it starts messing with the interviewer of, I don't trust this person because I can't see them.
Right. All these little things are like very interesting. I'm sure there's about a million other little things that you could provide to people to really help them along. I think one of the things that when we're talking about being a little bit nervous during an interview, I think you said something that was very important is be prepared. The other thing that I might point out is nobody knows more about you than you, so I've been in speaking engagements and I've done this type of thing for a while. And, I've always been, the things that I know the most about are the things that I can talk the best about, if that makes sense. Yep. If you ask me a question about, what's better, a Ford or a Dodge, I might not be able to have a conversation about that, but I can have a conversation about podcasting. I have a conversation about what I do and that type of thing, because I know what I do better than anybody else. So I think people need to understand there's nothing to get nervous about. You know yourself better than anybody else. Just be yourself.
Yeah, just try to be yourself as much as you can. And I think, again, it's a little more tactical, but the distractions are what really mess you up, because someone will pay more attention to that than what you're saying. And so, I always tell people to cross their legs and cross their, interlock their fingers so that their feet are not moving around and their hands aren't moving around. Because if you're doing a lot of this action, and I just said right there, if you're doing a lot of this action, like people are just going to pay attention to all your hand movements and not hear what you're saying. So as many, as little as distractions as you possibly can get is going to be in your benefit.
I don't know. As an Italian American, I would have a hard time with that. I probably wouldn't be able to get a word out. That's another story altogether, So, hey, listen.
I'm Irish, so I don't know.
Hey, listen, we're getting close to the end. That's funny. We're getting close to the end of our time together. Any final words you'd like to leave our audience with?
I think just two things. One is some encouragement. I know it's really tough right now. I know there's a lot of layoffs, and that's making the pool really, really large for potential candidates. So someone who doesn't have as much experience is even harder. But just hang in there and seek help where help is available, whether it's free or something through like the Career Builder Association or mom and dad's friends. Just try your best to hang in there and stay encouraged. And I know it's really tough, but it'll work out. And then the second thing is, don't be afraid to. I think what I want to say is the permission to explore finding and doing work you love. And I feel like I'm talking to the sort of mid-careerists a little bit more when I talk about this, because I do have one-on-one coaching as well. But if you're really not happy with the work you're doing, trust that there's something better for you. And that's just not a good way to live, is doing work you don't like. And so I encourage those folks to, explore and get help exploring and figure out what they really want to do and find and do work they love, because it's just the best when you do that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Good advice. Hey, Melissa, if our audience would like to get in contact with you, find out more about you and about your business, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah. So the best way to do it is my website, melissacoloton.com. And I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me there, there's a lot about me there as well. And all of my offerings sit on my LinkedIn profile. Those are probably the best ways to find me.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for being on the show with us today. You were an awesome guest.
Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Hey, folks, that's all we have for today. So thrilled you could be with us. Hey, don't forget, if you enjoyed today's episode, to subscribe and leave us a review. Business Breakthroughs is sponsored by Titan MediaWorks, providing podcast production and guest booking services for those who want to be in the podcasting space. Check us out at titanmediaworks.com. That's work spelled WORX. And also check out all of the other great hosts at the Small Business Deliver Network at smallbusinessdeliver.com. Hey, be sure to stay tuned for more business breakthroughs coming your way soon. Until next time, stay positive and keep on breaking through. Thanks a lot and have a great day.